When people think of vampires, they picture the caped, fictional creatures from old movies such as Dracula. But long before Hollywood, long before books, there were real stories. Stories that terrified entire villages, sparked military investigations, and left corpses that defied nature. Welcome to Off the Mystery, a new channel hosted by real people, no AI voices, just Fofi, bringing you the eerie, the unexpected, and the truly chilling. Tonight, we step into 5 chilling accounts of real vampire encounters. Whether you believe in vampires or not, these stories will test your certainty. Europe, 1725. A cold wind swept through the Serbian village of Kiseljevo as a farmer named Peter Plogojowicz died and was buried like any other man. But 3 days later, he came back. It began with a knock on his son's door. A terrified young man opened it and froze. There stood his father, pale, silent, eyes sunken. Peter simply said one word: food. The son fed him, too afraid to refuse. But the next night, Peter returned again, voice colder this time, more. And when the son refused, Peter walked away. The next morning, the son was found dead, and over the following days, 9 more villagers collapsed from exhaustion, each claiming they had been visited by Peter in their dreams, drained of strength, and as witnesses claimed drained of blood. Fear spread faster than any disease. The parish priest alerted the authorities, and soon imperial officers arrived with an executioner. One by one, they dug up the victims, but nothing prepared them for Peter's corpse. He looked freshly asleep, eyes open, skin untouched, and worst of all, dried blood clung to his lips. The executioner drove a stake into Peter's chest. A scream erupted, so loud and so human that hardened soldiers staggered back. Peter's body was burned to ash. The deaths finally stopped. Official reports from 1725 document the investigation, and to this day, historians couldn't explain what the officers found inside Peter's grave. The village of Blob, Poland. A herdsman named Emlot had always been known as a difficult, angry man. When he died, the villagers felt relief. But relief didn't last. At night, a familiar voice echoed through the streets, calling out the names of villagers one by one. The voice was his. People peeked from their shutters and swore they saw Emlot, pale, rotting, walking slowly through the fog, whispering the names of those soon to die. Terrified, officials exhumed his corpse and drove a stake through his heart. But that only made things worse, as the next night he came back looking mutilated, twisted, and furious. Villagers dropped dead from fright. Others were found suffocated in their beds. Emla mocked those who tried to stop him, laughing as they attacked his undead body. Finally, an executioner was summoned. He pierced the corpse with white thorn stakes, a traditional final death technique, and burned the body. Witnesses swore, fire screamed, and when the last embers died, the haunting stopped. Silesia, 1582. A well-respected man named Janus Canisius suffered a brutal injury after being kicked by his horse. Before dying, he spoke of ghostly figures, burning sensations, and shadows whispering in his room. At the moment of his death, a black cat leaped onto his bed. He was buried near the church altar, reserved for important citizens. But only days later, villagers whispered about nighttime disturbances. Those visited by Canisius described the same horrifying signs: an unbearable smell of decay, freezing, corpse-like breath, and the sound of grinding teeth in the darkness. People tolerated it for months until midsummer, when panic took over. They exhumed his coffin. Inside, they found something impossible. His skin was soft and warm. His joints moved freely, like the recently living. And when they cut his leg, fresh blood poured out. Canisius was burned, then hacked apart and crushed to ash. Only then did the visits stop. England, early 1800s. Croglin Grange had stood peacefully for generations until the Cranwell siblings moved in for the summer. One warm night, the sister, Amelia Cranwell, gazed out toward the graveyard. Between the tombstones, two tiny lights flickered. At first, she thought they were fireflies, but they moved together rhythmically, like eyes. The lights crept over the wall, floated across the lawn, and stopped beneath her window. Amelia shut the window, bolted the door, and tried to sleep. A rustling sound awoke her. Then she heard breathing on the other side of the glass. Two glowing eyes stared in at her. The window latch snapped. A skeletal hand reached in, unlocked it, and the creature climbed inside. It grabbed Amelia's hair, pulling her head back as its cold lips moved toward her neck. Her scream shook the entire house. Her brothers kicked down the door, only to find a shadow leaping out the window, sprinting across the lawn. Amelia survived, barely, and the family fled to Switzerland. But when she recovered, the siblings vowed revenge. They returned months later, waiting in the room with loaded pistols. And again, the eyes appeared. The creature slipped inside, but this time, gunfire erupted. The monster howled, stumbling back towards the graveyard. At dawn, villagers helped search. In a hidden crypt beneath the church, they found scattered bones, destroyed coffins, and one coffin untouched. Inside lay a shriveled corpse, wearing moldy clothes, with a fresh bullet wound in its leg. The villagers dragged the coffin outside and burned it, No more glowing eyes were ever seen at Croglin Grange. Our final case is not a legend. It is documented, witnessed, and terrifying. Born in 1560, Elizabeth Bathory, a powerful noblewoman of Transylvania, lived a life of luxury until disturbing rumors spread. Young girls sent to their castle with servants and never returned. Witnesses later described scenes of unimaginable cruelty. Girls stabbed with needles, burned with irons, bitten on their necks, shoulders, and faces, drained of blood for beauty rituals. Some claimed she bathed in the blood of the young. Others said she drank it. The more she tortured, the younger she appeared. Word reached the young king, and a full investigation began. When soldiers raided her castle, they found half-dead girls wandering the halls and bodies hidden in the walls. Elizabeth was placed in a sealed room with only tiny slits for food and air. She never saw daylight again. 4 years later, she told her guard, "My hands are cold." He replied, "Just lie down, mistress." And by morning, she was dead. Whether she was a vampire or simply the most brutal killer in history, her legacy inspires centuries of vampire mythology. So, what do you think? Are these cases the result of superstition, disease, or something darker? Stories like these shaped modern vampire legends, but for the people who lived them, they were terrifying realities. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the strange and the unexplained, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me next time for another Of the Mystery.